This lesson's on 1.6D, multiplying and dividing real numbers. I have discussed the relationships between main four operations. I've talked about how addition and subtraction are opposites and how multiplication and division are opposites. I've even gone as far as to point out for your higher level math that addition and multiplication are more like cousins because their rules are pretty similar, just like subtraction and division are pretty similar in terms of how their things work later on. But again, in terms of rules, addition and subtraction were mostly the same, but that's because, again, we learned that these are opposite operations of the same thing. And it works the same for multiplication and division. So the rules with negatives in multiplication and division and multiplication are also the same. Our job, though, is to learn the rules and make them part of our habits. You will find that just as adding fractions is tougher than multiplying fractions, for most people adding with negatives is more difficult than multiplying with negatives and dividing with negatives. So this should be a decently easy lesson. Not easy in terms of like how fast you get it, but the material isn't nearly as tough. That's why I actually put multiplication and division together. So just kind of stay with me here, and again, make sure you ask about anything you're lost on. How do negatives affect multiplication and division? The negative sign simply flips our answer from positive to negative, back to positive, back to negative, back to positive, kind of like a coin. So every negative in a multiplication or division problem simply switches the sign. So the actual multiplication or division does not change. That's why I said it's really not tough, because when you see some sort of 6 times some sort of 5, the number value is still going to be 30. When you see something like a 10 divided by a 2, the number value is still going to be a 5. You just have to find out if it's a positive or negative answer, and that's it. So again, we simply count the negatives to determine. Of course, 0 negatives is positive, but 1 negative would be negative. Once you flip it over with the second negative, the coin flips over, it becomes positive. Once you flip it again to a third negative, it again becomes negative. When you get a fourth negative, it flips back over and becomes positive. So I hope you understand again what I mean when I'm talking about, can't spell positive, sorry. What I mean when I talk about how it just flips like a coin, how it goes heads to tails, back to heads, back to tails. So again, 0 negatives is positive, 1 negative goes to negative, then it becomes positive, then it becomes negative, then it becomes positive. You could even do it in such a way where you say 1 negative looks like this, 2 looks like this, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And you could use that to count. Or you could even go as far as to use your common sense on this, which is notice that all your negative answers are odd and your positive answers are even. And so 8 negatives should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 positive because 8 is even. 11 negatives because it's odd should be negative, but watch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Notice how I end on a negative, which means that 11 is negative. So again, bottom line on that is just to count the negatives and then simplify. Again, it's not really tough. You just have to make sure you add it to your habits by practicing, working hard, asking questions, and doing what you need to do today. Because again, we are getting ready for a test. Your test is actually Tuesday in this class. So you'll have tomorrow and Friday. Monday you'll take a pre-test or a day to kind of review, and then, like I said, the test is here, and that's, for some of you, you'll need that to kind of keep you from being in a bad spot grade-wise. But here's what we do. -6 times -8. The first thing I'm going to do is look and say I have 2 negative signs, which makes it a positive answer, and then 6 times 8 is 48. That's all. Of course, we don't need to put the plus in front of it, but that's just there to show you that we are actually considering the sign. When you see 4 times -10, again, counting your negatives, I have 1, which means my answer is negative, and then 4 times 10 is 40. Even whenever you have more than 2 numbers, simply count the negatives. There's 1, 2, 3 negatives, which makes it, remember, 3 is odd, so it'll be negative, and then 3 times 2 is 6, 6 times 5 is 30, and so that's how you would answer it. The next 2 are more there because we need to make sure we understand the difference between this and that. In this problem, the exponent gets the power, or gets the highest call, but the exponent is expanding just to 5. It's not expanding the negative, it's just to 5. So based off of what we know, we rewrite the negative and then we put 5 twice. Again, make sure you write this because you need to understand why these two things are different. Now when we do it, we see how many negatives. Of course, 1, which means our answer is negative, and then 5 times 5 is 25, and you see your answer is negative 25. Even if you type it into your calculator as negative parentheses 5 closed squared, negative parentheses 5 closed squared, gives me the answer negative 25. This one, on the other hand, the squared is with everything here, so you actually have a negative 5 times negative 5, which means in this case we've got 2 negatives, which is positive, and 5 times 5, which is 25. And again, even if you checked it with your calculator the way it looks, the difference between the negative on the inside and outside is huge. And this is actually going to be a reason why a lot of you have issues typing into your calculator later, because you don't put your parentheses in right, or you don't use the parentheses right, and it's going to cause you a lot of stress and problems. So make sure you start paying attention to this type of thing, that you type exactly what you see and not just what you want it to be, because again, that discipline can save you a lot of time and stress. A couple more before we get ready to wrap it up. Again, some divisions, but again, it works the same way. In this problem, I see 1 negative. That means my answer is negative, and then 60 divided by 10 is 6. That's it. Here we have 2 negatives, which means my answer is positive, and 35 divided by 5 is 7. Again, I don't need that positive, and so there you go. If you're typing it in, it's negative 60 divided by 10 gives me a negative 6, and it's negative 35 divided by negative 5. Remember, your negative button is not the same as your minus button for those of you who are having that issue, and there's your positive 7. Your final thought on this is that the key to multiplying and dividing real numbers is just your own organization. Again, notice we put both of those into one lesson, whereas with addition, subtraction, we did it for 2 days. Your organization is everything. Before you even care about the number, it's best to determine the sign by counting the negatives and then figuring out if it's positive or negative. You'll find out that that's going to become even more important tomorrow when we talk about the distributive property. But again, just make sure you practice and make this your habit so you naturally work them out the same way. Once it becomes natural to you, then there's no way you miss it, but maybe a couple times along your way for the next few years. But again, just make sure you do your job today. Ask questions on what you need, and good luck.